the landscaping and lighting district ballot process has to be the most dishonest, deceptive thing I've ever seen the city of Santa Clarita do. It was right from the start and all the way right to the end. And it took me at least 8 weeks to follow through and find out all the information about it. And hang on just one second. And little by little, I followed it all the way down through the documentation that was right on the City of Santa Clarita website, and in some cases the county website. So it to me was just something that we really didn't need to go through. But like I said, I've spent over 2 months on this issue. All the information that I have comes from city council agendas, minutes, and staff reports. And in some respects, you go and you talk to some of the people at City Hall, and you don't get any answers. Or you get a deceptive answer. And then that deceptive answer allows you to go find out something else that's going on in the project. But right at the beginning, 2 months ago, I published that first the first article in the Gazette. And when I published that article in the Gazette, the Santa Clarita City Communications Manager said, I invite you to call, and we'll answer any question you have. Well, I called, and I asked questions, and she didn't have the answers. She said, I've got to go find out the answers. And nothing ever came of it. I never heard anything. So I called. Remember when I came at the last meeting and said I was going to call every day until someone answered me? And she came back and she texted and she said, well, you know, it would really be good if you could send those questions in writing. So I did that day. I sent them back in writing. I still haven't heard anything. I went to the last council meeting and spoke with her, and she said, oh, I thought you talked with someone else. No, I'm waiting for your answers. And she said, oh, I'll get them together and send them to you. Well, this is the second week. I'm still waiting. So it's a situation where not only is it a bad thing, but no one wants to talk about it. So I went to the council meeting. And the first time we went, they acted surprised, like, we don't know anything about this. I was surprised. Oh my God, I got one of these letters in the mail too. Oh, this is shameful, right? But in fact, this thing started well over a year ago. And we're going to trace it down through in the highlights of what went on to show you. And the question is now, why are they remaining silent? And compared to when I talked to you last time, I have the final piece of information about the whole thing. So from my expectations, I believe that when you go to a council meeting and you read a staff report or you listen to an explanation, there should be no question. What they've told you is the truth, that it's in English, and they told you the truth. It's not in some foreign language. And as far as I'm concerned, if the council members were doing their job, remember, what was it, a year ago or something, right after Cameron Smythe took his seat, and I asked him a question, and I said, gee, it seems like you don't know what's going on. He was so insulted that someone would dare suggest that the man did not read everything that he was supposed to or understand what was going on. But in fact, they should be able to explain this stuff. Why do they have to wait for the city manager to answer for them? Why can't they answer it themselves? Well, I don't think they know either. So if you go on the city website, you'll see that the city says we have a department called special districts, all right? Well, special districts are autonomous local government organizations, like, for example, the Santa Clarita Sanitation District. Santa Clarita Sanitation District has its own board, does its own voting, makes its own decisions, and it's not managed by the city. Because the city of Santa Clarita doesn't have any special districts. What it has is, it has special assessment districts, and they're very, very different. They are things where you you provide a service or you can provide a service, or you can provide some piece of capital equipment that provides a special benefit to your property. If I was to say, oh my gosh, look, I've done this, and everybody in Santa Clarita benefits, that would make it a general benefit, not a special benefit. And because of that, they should not be able to form a special benefit assessment district and charge you as a property owner. So a couple of examples are the landscape maintenance district, where the biggest one is the LMD is 2008-1 that funds all the medians in the center roadways all through Santa Clarita. And that's on your property tax bill, on the third section of your property tax bill, as a special benefit district. Or the lighting districts. And the lighting districts are also special benefit districts. They have been since the beginning of time out here in Santa Clarita. So the question is, if they don't manage any special districts, why do they mix the terminology constantly? And in some respects, it confuses you. And you're going to see why when they presented the lighting and landscaping ballot, it was intentionally written deceptively. They shouldn't mix terms and confuse you, but they do this all the time. So I'm going to try to do this today in plain English. If you've read some of the columns, and one of the reasons why I decided to do this again was because if you read some of my columns, I tried to use very precise language. I tried to use language that nobody at the city could tell me that I was doing the wrong thing. And finally, at the last council meeting, when we got through with the discussion there, I talked to a couple of people, and they said, well, you know, it's so detailed, and the language is still so convoluted, we don't really understand it. So I said, we'll need to bring this back in plain English. And I wrote another article, which will come out tomorrow, and it comes through the highlights of what went on, and I try to use it plain English. And while I say they mix terms, is because if you have been following this with them, they get up and say, lighting and landscaping is one district. And so we can vote on it as one item. But that's because they mix the terms from one law and another law. So the 1972 Act says, well, yeah, you can create an engineer's report which combines districts and call it a district. But the Proposition 218 vote on taxes law says that each one of these are autonomous areas and should be voted on separately. So if you mix them, it just doesn't work. Santa Clarita is a general law city. Understand that Santa Clarita does not have the authority or the ability to levy any taxes. You know, that we have, like for example, in Santa Clarita, they say we don't have any business taxes. Well, that's true. The county has business taxes. And so the county will come in here and charge a business tax. And because the city is in the county, they'll forward that money to the city. But the city itself never established that as a business tax because they can't levy taxes. Instead, they levy special benefits against property, and they do it by two basic laws. The first is the Landscape and Lighting Act of 1972, which was modified again in 1982, and it defines the types of services that you can use to provide a benefit to property. And then there's Proposition 218, the Right to Vote on Taxes Act, which requires that these items in a benefit district provides a special benefit to property and requires those assessments to be voted on by the property owners. Not voters, property owners. So if you look at your tax bill, you look at your property tax bill, it's divided into 3 sections. The top section is that 1% of your assessed valuation. That's called the ad valorem tax, or the tax on value. The next is voted indebtedness. Those are bonds. Bonds are voted on by people, okay? And then there's special assessment districts, and those are voted on by property owners. The one thing that Proposition 218 allowed the cities to do is it allows the city to include automatic cost escalators in assessment districts. So they can turn around, they can say, well, like, for example, the open space and parkland preservation district. That district allows you to increase the assessment $1 a year. Started out at $25, and over 30 years it was going to go up $1 a year. The original reason why that was true was because they were going to borrow $30 million, and that just happened to be enough money with the number of people in the number of pieces of property in the district at the beginning, where they would be able to pay the debt service all the way through to the end. We know now that they didn't borrow $30 million, they borrowed 15. So they actually were collecting more money than they need, and that kind of becomes questionable as to whether or not it should be allowed. So currently, our city staff favors using the Consumer Price Index to determine each year's maximum permitted assessment increase. And in most all of these landscape districts, they have a cost escalator based upon the Consumer Price Index. And every year, the council adds that Consumer Price Index to the maximum allowable assessment. Doesn't necessarily mean that's what they're going to charge you, but that's the maximum allowable assessment. Keep that in mind, because that's going to become interesting in just a minute. So as concerned community members, we need to make sure that they don't collect more money than they need. That the whole purpose of this is to be able to support that special benefit, not to collect money. And certainly, remember, and they tell us this all the time, oh, this is a Proposition 218 assessment district. We can't use the money for anything other than what we had established the district for. And we need to hold their feet to the fire. So a little bit of history. Prior to the city being formed, I know you're not going to believe this, but there were streetlights, right? It wasn't Santa Clarita that established streetlights, it was the county. And they decided that streetlight services would be provided by a special benefit district, and they administered it there. Now, at the time they did this was before the law changed to allow them to add in an automatic escalator. And they decided in the county that they were going to fund streetlights as a part of that ad valorem tax, that 1% of your assessed value. And if you go out onto the county website, you'll see that if you go to their frequently asked questions, you can see that's the way they elected to do business. In 1979, they formed a second district because now they started to see all of the development out here. And when they generated this new district, they said, okay, for new added streetlights, we're going to use an assessment, and we're not going to give you any ad valorem tax to fund those new lights. So when Santa Clarita became a city in 1998, the streetlights fell within the jurisdiction of the city of Santa Clarita. So now all of a sudden the county says, okay, you got a city here, so you take care of your own business. And what they did was they said, you, Santa Clarita, now are responsible to levy the assessments, maintain the money, manage the districts, and take care of business. And district number 2, I love it when they do this. District number 2 is the first one formed. Okay? Okay, so district number 2 is funded by property tax, and the amount of property tax they get, just a second, is set by the county auditor and State Board of Equalization. The city has no say over that at all. Yes, sir.
Wasn't the city formed in 87? You got it 98 there.
Yes, it was formed in 87, but the county didn't turn over jurisdiction until 1998.
Okay.
Why they waited till 1998, I have no idea. But that, if you go in and you look at the, if you remember, if you watched the city council meeting, the last city council meeting, you saw Darren Hernandez get up and say, the law doesn't require this, but we have 13 years of engineers' reports out on the city website. And what I did was I went to the first one, the oldest one I could find. And in the oldest one I could find on the city website, it had a definition of how the districts were formed and when they were turned over to the city. That's the information I got out of there. Why it was a few years late, I don't know. But in 2007, the city started to take note, because if you go to the older engineers' reports, you'll see that the older district, zone number 2, was large, and zone number 1, all the newer areas were smaller. And as time went on, the newer areas got bigger, and the old ones stayed about the same. So they decided to add a section in the engineers' report in 2007. And they put an assessment on the older district, which they can do. I would assume they had a vote for $12.38. And the maximum rate previously applied prior to 1997 did not allow them to add a special escalator. And at the same time in 2007, the city increased district number 1, which is the newer district, and moved their rate to $52.56. And they've been increasing that rate ever since. And now, currently, the rate is $81.71. So if you remember, this is what the whole thing was a discussion about. Why are those guys only assessed $12.38, and why are those guys assessed $81? Well, the reason is because these guys over here are mainly funded in another way. So here's when this whole thing started. You might think that this the streetlight ballot started in the end of last year, but it didn't. It started in May of 2017, and in May of 2017, the city authorized and approved the purchase of the Southern California Edison streetlights for $9.5 million. And at the same time, they talked about the conversion of all the streetlights to LEDs for $5.6 million. But you know what? When you look at that staff report, they didn't have a way to pay for it. It said, you know what we're going to do? Staff is going to come back at some future date, and we'll tell you how to pay for it. But they knew. In June of 2017, staff consolidated all of the landscaping and lighting districts into a single engineer's report. Nothing wrong with that. If you look through engineers' reports on benefit assessment districts, it has a ton of boilerplate babbling information. And why have it in 50 or 60 different documents when you can just have it in one? And what they did was they said, okay, based upon Proposition 218, we're going to make special benefit districts known as zones, but the concept of charging fees for services within an area of special benefit or zone didn't change. So they changed the name from districts to zones, and we moved on. But the thing that was really interesting and intriguing about it was that a paragraph got added to the definition of what those streetlight zones would fund. And that paragraph indicated approval of 30 years worth of revenue bonds for the acquisition of the streetlights. So they knew how they were going to pay for it. I don't recall voting on it in 2007. I don't think anybody did vote it on 2007. It's one of the things that I'm moving on to a higher authority to complain about it and say, look, Proposition 218 says you are going to apply and spend the money that you collect in that district or zone, however we want to call it, based upon the information, the benefit, and the services you were going to provide when it was formed. If you're going to change how that information, you need to vote on it. It needs a property owner vote because you're actually putting the district in greater debt. So in January of 2018, the council went ahead and approved $4.4 million to convert Santa Cruz streetlights to LEDs. If you remember, the reason why they did this it was that they claimed that they spend about $12 and some change per streetlight for electric services, and that if they bought the streetlights, their service rate would go down, and then if they converted to LEDs, it would go down even farther. And then if you multiply out their savings times the number of streetlights, they were going to save, what, $22 million. And they paid for this by borrowing from the streetlight property tax fund provided by the county. Well, okay. And then they committed to repay it when they had permanent financing, which they didn't do. They paid part of it back, but not all of it. And that's one of the questions that I asked them as to what happened, how come the two numbers don't agree. In February of 2018, the City Council approved borrowing up to $17 million using the lease revenue bond, using the revenue bonds to pay for the streetlight purchase and retrofit costs, and that was supposedly authorized by the paragraph that mysteriously got added in 2017. But here's the real reason why they wanted this deal. And this was in the February 2018 staff report. The city may lease up to 4,500 of these poles to telecom companies for internet and phone usage. So one would ask the question, if you're paying for the loan and your district is buying the streetlights, why isn't your district going to benefit from any revenue that comes in because of it? But there's no guarantee. There's not even any discussion that it's going to pay off what the operational costs are. But it would generate some income from the city. But that's in plain English. They want you to pay the bill to buy them, and then they're going to go lease them and benefit from them. So they sealed the deal on November 2018. The city approved initiating an assessment ballot process to modify the landscape maintenance district and streetlight maintenance district amounts. Why? Because now they claimed, well, it's illegal for you guys to be paying $12 and you guys to be paying $81. Well, I'm not sure that's really true. They're two different districts. They should be managed separately. This one has additional revenue. Why should they have to pay the same amount? And if they did pay the same amount, would you be able to still collect the money from the county? You remember the library purchase? When they purchased the library and they said, oh, we're going to just use that ad valorem tax. In that case, we had the resolution that formed it. It said, no, if you leave our county library system, you don't get that tax. And I remember going up and asking them that question, and they saying, oh, no, Al, forget it. You're not very smart. Of course we can collect the tax. Well, as soon as they left the county library system, they got a letter from the county tax collector said, we're not collecting this tax for you anymore. So the question is, why are you doing this? So then here's the most interesting part of this whole thing. They said staff indicated a need to correct a disparity for the 13 LMDs that were paying for parks in their assessment when the other 22 city-owned parks were financed by the general fund. So one of the questions that I'd asked, and I continue to ask, is what is this disparity? What are the name of those 13 parks? Are they public parks? Because if they're in a gated community, they shouldn't be paid for by the general fund. Are they accessible to the public? You know, what's the disparity? So when they canceled it, when they canceled this thing, when they canceled it, I went to the council and I said, at the next meeting, and I said, guys, you know what? If you really believe there's a disparity and the people that are paying for the parks shouldn't be paying for them, are you still going to give them the money? Are you still going to give them the reduction? And they said, oh, no. You don't realize what's going on. And you know what? I didn't, because I believed what they said in plain English. So here on November 18th, they mailed out a letter informing the affected property owners. Rick got his first, called me and said, did you see this letter? I said, no, I haven't seen it yet. And so he was going to show it to me. But the letter never mentioned that there were different versions going out to certain property owners if they were also in an LMD as well as a lighting district. So the letter I got, because I'm only in a lighting district in light zone number 2, okay, was we're going to increase your thing to $81. But if you got one, if you were in an LMD, you got one that said, you know what, we're going to increase it, but we're going to offset the cost by reducing your LMD fee because we're not going to charge you for these parks anymore. Really? Interesting. Doesn't that sound like to you that one is offsetting the other? Doesn't it sound that way? Well, you're wrong. And they showed me that you're wrong. So, and it's not because you don't understand English, it's because they were being deceptive. When you receive the letters, I love the wording. It said, if you vote yes, that you'll go along with this, you support maintaining streetlights in your neighborhood. But if you don't know, if you mark it no, it indicates you don't. Well, wait a minute. Does that mean my streetlights are going to go off? What does that mean? So then came the ballots, and the ballots had different versions as well. And after I got that word that we're really not giving people a reduction, I started calling around, and I started getting copies of some of these ballots. I have them with me. That really shows. It really says it. You know, we're going to increase your rate here. We're going to decrease your rate there. See it. You don't have a problem. Well, the other part about this that was really strange was that this vote was supposed to be accomplished by one vote. We have at least 14 different versions of these ballots going out. The 14 different versions are going to collect votes from 14 different areas, and then we'll make a decision on this whole thing. Well, wait a minute. That's not the way it's supposed to work. We're supposed to manage all these separately. They should all vote separately. They should all be changed separately. So the pushback started right away. It wasn't very long before someone said, hey, you know what? We don't understand this. I remember right when the ballots first went out, people were asking the question, you know, what does a yes and no vote mean? Does this mean if we vote no, we don't support streetlights, we want our area to be dark? And that was not true. Some people were put off by the proposed 500% increase in the Zone 2 fee. I mean, that's what we heard about most. Some wanted to know the justification for the decision to be made by a combined vote. That was a very small number that had a fairly good understanding of Proposition 218. But what I found out after I asked that question about, are you really going to give these people a reduction? Some people started to notice the LMD proposed reduced rate was more than they were currently paying. Oh, that's interesting, isn't it? Because the offset in fees was not real. The reduced numbers were being quoted from the maximum allowable assessment, which isn't what the property owners were being charged. Okay? I obtained ballots from Fair Oaks over here, and I obtained ballots from Valencia Meadows. And then, once I realized that this was a terminology issue, that when you read the ballots, it said current maximum fee, maximum fee, and when you actually looked at their assessment, which was recorded in the engineer's report, it was a different number. Then I realized what they were saying. They never intended to give anybody a reduction. And I think that was just, it was designed that way at the beginning. I thought that was terrible. Pushback, all the pushback. Oh, and by the way, when I talked to the Fair Oaks people, they said, yeah, you know, we noticed that. We noticed that. We said, look at this number. And they called in, started asking questions. Said we never did get a good answer about why those numbers were the way they were. So based upon all the pushback, and I think more than anything else, there was the realization by individuals that understood that the numbers they were being quoted weren't real. They canceled the ballot process. Then they blamed the confusion on you, the public. Well, you're confused, right? We know what we're doing, right? You're not sufficiently informed. The letter canceling the ballot statement, over the next year, the city is going to undertake additional outreach to determine how to proceed. Well, and then they were also told, after they had done sufficient outreach, the issue was going to come back at some future date. But I don't believe it at all. And the reason why I don't believe it is because I believe City Hall got exactly what they wanted. They got away with inappropriately adding the authorization to the engineer's report to justify a $15 million loan. And they did it to put themselves in business to lease streetlights to cell phones, cell sites, and transmitter sites, and so that they can, in your neighborhood, so they can turn around and they could fund whatever it is that they wanted to fund. So this issue came before all 5 members too many times. Came before them starting in May of 2017 for them not to know what they were planning. And were they doing their job? Did they really understand what was going on? I mean, every time, the last time I went up and talked to them, they looked like they just sat there. They didn't say a word. It was understand. I think that if they don't take some swift action to prevent a similar situation from occurring in the future, it'll be our responsibility to take action at the next election when they come up for another term, sitting and warming those chairs. But I've never seen anything this deceptive at the City Hall, and I'm very ashamed that they would have accomplished something like that.